April 12, 1944. Dawn breaks over the rolling fields of northern France. The sky is painted in streaks of pale orange and steel gray, and the chill of early spring bites at the exposed skin inside the cockpit. You can almost feel the freezing wind whipping around the fuselage of the lone Spitfire, its engine humming a tense mechanical heartbeat. Captain Edward "Eddie" Mallory, known among his peers as the Bookworm Pilot, adjusts his goggles, scanning the horizon with a quiet intensity. He isn't the type to boast about daring maneuvers or aerial victories, but today that reserved intellect will be tested like never before. His squadron had been scattered after a night raid, leaving him isolated above enemy territory, with nothing but his wits and the thin wings of his fighter. Suddenly, the distant roar of engines cuts through the morning haze. 6 Messerschmitt Bf 109s appear like shadows against the sunrise, slicing the sky with deadly precision. Each fighter is a predator, eyes locked on Mallory. He tightens his grip on the control stick, feeling the vibration of the aircraft beneath him. Panic flutters briefly in his chest, but he swallows it. Experience and instinct take over. He recalls the flight manuals he had devoured late into the night, the diagrams, the enemy tactics, the calculations of turning radii and climb rates. Every page, every note, every diagram in his journals has led to this moment. And though the enemy doesn't know it yet, Mallory has a plan, a calculated trick that could turn the tables entirely. The enemy formation closes in, bullets beginning to stitch lines across the morning sky. He can see the glint of their guns, hear the distant rattle as tracer rounds streak past. For a moment, time seems to stretch, every heartbeat a drum of tension. And then, with a subtle tilt and a barely perceptible dive, he begins to weave a pattern that will confound all 6 pursuers. The first trick is subtle, a sudden roll to the left that forces the closest fighter to overshoot, momentarily breaking formation. The second fighter falters, unsure of the unexpected maneuver. Mallory's mind races. The calculations he has memorized come alive in seconds, guiding his next move. But the sky is still full of threats. He must act quickly, or this solo engagement could become his last. The Bf 109s adjust, sharpening their angles, determined to cut him off. And then, in a heartbeat, he executes the move he has rehearsed only in theory, a daring maneuver that will either ensure his survival or send him spiraling toward oblivion. Mallory's fingers tighten on the throttle as he banks sharply over a thin veil of clouds, the Spitfire shivering with the sudden maneuver. You can almost hear the whine of metal straining, feel the sudden tug of gravity pressing him into the seat. 6 enemy fighters are in pursuit, each one trained to anticipate patterns, to read the skies like a chessboard. But they have never faced someone like Mallory, a pilot who fights as much with his mind as with his machine. He dives abruptly, aiming toward a narrow canyon that slices through the French countryside below. The Messerschmitts fan out, trying to predict his descent. One by one, they begin to bunch up, their formations faltering. Mallory's trick relies on precision timing. If he miscalculates even slightly, he risks colliding with the earth, or worse, with the very fighters he is outmaneuvering. As he twists and climbs, the first fighter overshoots, veering dangerously close to a cliffside. Mallory watches with calm detachment, noting every shift in the enemy's angle, every twitch of their wings. His strategy is simple in concept, but devilishly complex in execution. Use the enemy's confidence and their expectation of aggressive dogfighting against them. Make them chase, make them commit, and then lead them into a trap of his own making. The second and third fighters follow, their engines screaming in the thinning air. Mallory executes a sudden vertical climb, forcing them into a tight turn that leaves them exposed. You can almost feel the tension, the hot breath of the moment, the adrenaline coursing through the veins of a man who has spent nights dreaming of these precise calculations. For a split second, everything hangs suspended. The roar of engines, the hiss of bullets, the cold gusts of wind through the canopy. And then, with a flick of his wrist and a push of the rudder, Mallory executes the decisive move, a rolling dive through the clouds, disappearing from sight for an instant. The 6 enemy fighters, now disoriented, begin to scatter, each trying to regain visual contact. Mallory's gamble has paid off, but the danger is far from over. He knows the German pilots are seasoned and relentless. They will not give up easily. Yet, as he reappears from the cloud cover, he spots the perfect opening, a narrow corridor between the hills, a place where the enemy's numbers become a liability rather than an advantage. Mallory's Spitfire slices through the corridor like a blade, engines screaming, leaving a wake of turbulent air that confuses the 6 Messerschmitts above. You can almost feel the whip of wind as he tilts and twists the plane, each maneuver calculated down to the fraction of a second. The enemy pilots, trained to anticipate aggression, now find themselves caught in a web of Mallory's making. One by one, the fighters try to follow, but the narrow passage exposes them to the limits of their aircraft's agility. The first 2 fighters overshoot entirely, forced into dangerous banking turns that send them spiraling toward the rocky cliffs below. Mallory watches carefully, a silent observer to the chaos he has orchestrated. Every twist of the Spitfire's wing, every press of the rudder, is a note in a symphony of aerial strategy. The remaining 4 adjust, attempting to corner him from above. But Mallory had anticipated this. He flips the plane into a steep climb, a maneuver known among pilots as the Immelmann, and simultaneously pulls a subtle yaw to the left. In that instant, he disappears behind the canyon wall, leaving the enemy uncertain, disoriented, and dangerously bunched together. He can almost hear their engines, strained and screaming, as they struggle to regain formation. The air smells of smoke and tension, the sun glinting off the metal of their fuselages. Mallory's heart pounds, but his mind is calm, focused. Every textbook maneuver he memorized, every flight journal studied late into the night, has led to this precise moment. Then comes the critical revelation: the enemy has made themselves predictable. In their desperation to catch him, they have funneled into a pattern of pursuit that Mallory can exploit. He realizes that with one final calculated twist, he can turn their strength into a fatal weakness. The 6 fighters, once a looming threat, are now vulnerable, their coordination broken, their confidence shaken, their formation compromised. But executing this next move will be the riskiest part of all. One miscalculation, one hesitation, and the clever trap he has built could ensnare him instead. The tension is almost unbearable. The sky becomes a theater of life and death. And Mallory, the Bookworm Pilot, is the masterful conductor of its deadly symphony. Mallory leans forward, eyes narrowing behind the goggles, every muscle in his body synchronized with the Spitfire beneath him. The 6 Messerschmitts are closing in, unaware that they are about to fly directly into the trap he has meticulously prepared. He begins a seemingly erratic weave, sudden rolls, tight dives, and quick climbs, each movement designed to bait the enemy into overcommitting. The first fighter takes the bait, diving headlong after him, followed by the second and third. Mallory arcs sharply upward, and they overshoot once again, engines screaming, wings straining. The remaining three, seeing the chaos unfold, attempt to regain control, but Mallory has already calculated their trajectory. With a subtle twist of the stick, he guides the Spitfire through a thin column of rising mist that masks his movements. In an instant, the 6 enemy planes are caught in confusion. Their spacing is ruined, their angles compromised. Mallory pulls off the maneuver he had practiced only in theory, a synchronized dive and roll that allows him to appear behind the lead fighter almost magically. The enemy is blind to his position, thinking they still have the upper hand. Now comes the masterstroke. Mallory releases a controlled burst from his machine guns, forcing the lead fighter into evasive maneuvers. One by one, the others react instinctively, their formation collapsing like dominoes. He watches as they jostle for position, collide with their own mistakes, and lose the advantage they had believed was uncheckable. The Bookworm Pilot isn't just surviving, he is dominating. The 6 enemy fighters, once a terrifying threat, are now a tangled, confused mass in the sky, victims of the intelligence and strategy they had underestimated. Mallory feels a rush of triumph, tempered by the ever-present risk. One misstep could still be fatal. And then, just as he prepares to disengage, a single gunshot cracks through the air, closer than expected. His heart skips. Has one enemy fighter recovered? Or is this the echo of a miscalculated shot? The moment stretches into eternity. Mallory doesn't wait to find out. He rolls sharply, diving toward a low ridge that rises like a jagged spine from the French countryside. The Spitfire shudders as it cuts through the air, but Mallory's focus is razor-sharp. Below him, the earth races upward, trees and rocks blurring past, while above, the remaining enemy fighters struggle to regain cohesion. The sudden change of altitude and speed throws the pursuers off balance. 2 fighters overshoot entirely, forced to climb sharply to avoid the ground. Another falters, caught in turbulence created by the ridge, and is forced into evasive maneuvers that send it spinning away from the engagement. Only 1 or 2 even manage to maintain visual contact, but Mallory has already mapped their positions in his mind. He navigates through a narrow valley, using the landscape as both shield and weapon. The ridges and cliffs act as natural obstacles, forcing the enemy to break formation repeatedly. Each maneuver he executes is deliberate, a chess move that leaves them increasingly exposed and disoriented. The roar of engines, once threatening, now becomes almost comical against the chaos of the enemy's failed coordination. Finally, Mallory levels off above a river, the sunlight glinting off the water below. The remaining Messerschmitts, battered and confused, hesitate. They know the advantage has slipped from their grasp, but pride and duty prevent them from abandoning the fight entirely. Mallory, however, has already seized the moment. With a calculated burst of speed and a sharp climb, he disappears into a cloud bank, leaving his enemies chasing ghosts in the morning sky. As the clouds swallow the Spitfire, Mallory allows himself a brief exhale. His heart is still racing, his mind still alert, but a grin spreads across his face. The Bookworm Pilot has done what few could imagine: outsmarted 6 enemy fighters with intellect, strategy, and precise execution. Yet even in victory, questions linger. How will the rest of his squadron react when they hear of his solo encounter? Will the enemy pilots recover to challenge him again? The air is calm now, but in the world of aerial combat, peace is always temporary. By mid-morning, Mallory's Spitfire glides over friendly territory. The adrenaline has ebbed slightly, replaced by a quiet exhaustion and the weight of what just occurred. You can almost hear the hum of the engine slowing, the soft creak of metal cooling, and the distant calls of ground crews signaling over the radio. Every detail of the engagement replays in his mind, the angles, the timing, the precise execution of each maneuver. Back at the airbase, whispers spread like wildfire. Pilots and mechanics gather around, eager to hear how the Bookworm Pilot survived what seemed like an impossible encounter. Mallory recounts the story in careful, measured words, not for glory, but for accuracy. He describes the maneuvers, the miscalculations of the enemy, the calculated risks he took. His voice is calm, but behind it, a quiet satisfaction hums. Command quickly recognizes the extraordinary feat. Reports are filed, citations recommended, and soon the story of Mallory's solo engagement spreads through the ranks. He is lauded not only for skill and bravery, but for his intellect, a reminder that strategy and knowledge can triumph over sheer force. The Bookworm Pilot, once underestimated, becomes a symbol of ingenuity in the skies of World War II. Yet even in recognition, Mallory remains humble. He knows the truth of aerial combat. Victory is fleeting, and the next encounter could be far less forgiving. The 6 enemy fighters he outsmarted today were skilled, relentless, and determined. Their defeat is temporary, their revenge inevitable. He studies his flight journals again that evening, already planning, already calculating, knowing that the mind is the greatest weapon a pilot can wield. As night falls over the airbase, the stars glitter above like silent witnesses to the day's events. Mallory sits quietly, reviewing maps and flight diagrams, the hum of the Spitfire long silenced. He smiles faintly, remembering the look of confusion in the enemy formation, the way his calculated trick unfolded perfectly. One man, alone against 6, had turned the tide with intellect and daring, a story that would be told for years, whispered in hangars and admired in mess halls.